Do more is a call to action for all Australians to be allies, making the commitment to become more informed, more educated, and more engaged in creating positive change to challenge racism. This conversation series seeks to make change through storytelling. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community, and what we learn through storytelling culture of the longest continuous civilization on the planet. We pay our respect to elders, past and present.
So, Peter, hi.
Hey, how are
Hi.
you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks.
Thank you for being a part of this DoMore project. I think it's always exciting to interview talent that has skin in the game, literally, and who has got insight into the experiences as a person of colour in the sporting, both in the sporting arena, but he's also doing a lot outside of sport as well. So these are the kind of issues I wanted to explore with you. Before proceeding, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're both meeting, and in particular pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, noting that this land has always been and always will be Aboriginal land. So, Peter, a little bit about your background for those who don't know. You arrived here as a young child, if I'm right, at the tender age of, was it 8 years old?
I was here actually at 10.
At 10?
Yeah.
Still pretty young. So before that, can you give us a snapshot of where you were and what life was like?
Yes, I was born in Sudan, Khartoum, and I was there for about 6 years. And then we moved from Sudan to Egypt for 4 years before moving to Toowoomba, Queensland, for another 4 years. And then I moved to Perth. So yeah. And now I'm in Melbourne. So it's kind of a lot of moving around.
So Sudan to Egypt, or Khartoum to Egypt to Toowoomba.
Khartoum to Egypt is pretty close, so that's
this
okay.
is true. This is North Africa. But North Africa to North Queensland?
Yeah, that one.
I'm guessing that was a bit of a culture shock.
That one is a journey and a half, yeah. And then I guess when you're like 10 years old, you're just kind of excited to get there. You don't even realize how long that flight is, and you don't really think about it. But yeah, definitely a culture shock, completely different place.
And can you tell me, arriving as a 10-year-old kid from North Africa to North Queensland, did at any point early in the journey or early in settlements, or was it maybe later on, that you felt self-aware as someone who didn't necessarily look like everyone else in your school, in your town, in your city?
Yeah, I think we have to go way back. I think that experience was early back in Egypt because Egypt was, those experiences were pretty early then. Just you can notice because there's a lot of Sudanese that obviously flee Sudan to go to Egypt for almost a better opportunity, but also to try to get out of Egypt because so from there on you kind of see it already. You look different, you're treated differently, and as we can see now, it's actually coming out now more. It's been circulating around social media with so much racism towards the Sudanese in Egypt, but it's like coming out now. But that stuff's been happening for years, like since I was like 10 years old. Since I was 6, living in Egypt, so now it's coming out and stuff like that. So those experiences are so early on. So coming to Australia was like, oh, it's a little bit different. Like it's a little bit different of noticing. It's like Egyptians were really direct. Like you'd be walking around the street and they'd just shout out words and stuff like that. But in Australia, it wasn't as open. But you can also notice there's a difference.
Subtle racism.
Yeah, definitely, like subtle, like kind of almost hidden, like little jabs and stuff like that. And then you do have those guys that are openly racist too at the same time. But it was definitely a lot more in Egypt that you notice. And then Australia was just kind of like, you almost had to figure it out. Like, I've been in Australia now 18 years. 18 years, yeah.
So you would have seen the evolution of the Sudanese community substantially since you were a kid to where you are now.
Yeah, I kind of seen it in like different lenses kind of thing, like because obviously with running, you get to kind of travel the world as well. And you kind of see all these different lenses. So from Toowoomba, then to Perth, and then to Melbourne, it's like you kind of see it like develop, and then Melbourne is probably the only bad experiences I really had over there, because I think 2018 there was a lot of stuff popping up with the South Sudanese youth and stuff like that. So you can kind of see when you kind of, and the only thing that really annoyed me was you can kind of see like someone knows you're kind of South Sudanese, they're like, oh, these are troublemakers. But then they're like, oh, you're not though, because you're an Olympian. but it's like, well,
Yes.
I'm still South Sudanese. You shouldn't
Yes.
be able to be treating me differently, which is kind of sucked in a lot of ways. But you can kind of see that people almost treated you based on your position as well. Like, okay, you're still black, but you're doing something, so we're gonna treat you a little bit differently. But that's not kind of wrong at the same time.
They qualify you according to how valuable you are.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, a few minutes ago, if you didn't know I was an Olympian, you just kind of look down on me.
So then, based on that, did you notice a difference in the way people received you before entering sport compared to after?
yeah, definitely, and not just in Australia, all through the world. I had experience where I was in London, and I was coming through, and there was African couple in front of me, and the border control was like, I'm asking them a lot of questions, like, what are you doing here? How long are you staying here? This and this and this and that. And I come up and they ask me the same question. But as soon as I take out my Australian passport, it's like, oh, go in. Like the questions kind of changed. So you kind of see that everywhere. And then in Belgium, I had this experience where I met some Sudanese over there in Belgium, and they were refugees. They fled Sudan, and they're trying to get into the UK. And I was speaking to them, and then I told them I was from Australia, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, whoa, like I would love to go there. And I said, why? Like, we Australians love to come to Europe for a holiday. And then that was like the difference. Like, okay, you're here for a holiday, but we're here to live. And then at that time, I was actually reading a book, Cold Blood River, which is the colonization of Congo by the Belgians and stuff like that. So you could kind of see everything. You could see Black people were treated so much differently. Like they were treated so much lesser than everyone else. And you could see it there. Like you could see it through Paris. You could see it everywhere. And then it's kind of sad to realize that you could see it everywhere in the world. And then that problem wouldn't really exist if we just learn to treat people as they are for who they are, rather than their skin color, their status, or their wealth, And then you start kind of doing that. And another thing is like I never wanted to question, like, you never want to question your position in a country while representing it. And that's kind of tough. Like, okay.
So how do you negotiate that? How do you then negotiate when you're in a position where you are representing a country, like Australia, for example, and then Australia has a track record of, it's not a good track record when it comes to race relations historically. Yeah. How do you reconcile the past with where you want to be?
I think understanding, I think I just learned to talk more about it, because we kind of go into hiding. You don't want to speak about it, and you think and sometimes I've learned, there's a time not to speak about it, especially if it compromises on your health and your mental health and stuff like that. Because these things are kind of really heavy at the same time to address. And if you're better if you're better. So if this is compromising your mental health, then you can't really help anyone else anyways. Sure. So you kind of,
you set your boundaries.
There's boundaries, and you gotta it's just like sport. You gotta kind of build that mental strength, like speaking about it, confronting racism, and understanding the history. You gotta put in the work. It's not just gonna.
But when people talk about communities and having all these negative perceptions of them, do you think then the work exists with the communities to change how they're perceived, or is it the work of the mainstream society to educate themselves on how wrong they've got it?
A bit of both, definitely. I think as individuals, we can only do so much, but we can obviously spark a lot of minds to kind of talk about it and do more, and then that kind of becomes a community. Like within athletics, athletics is a community that I'm obviously part of. So if I speak a little bit about it, I saw Morgan do an interview, Nana did an interview, and then you have Joseph Deng, and then it's like, oh, and then the athletics community is like, oh, these actually matters, and then the friends you're with, whether they're white and black, they can kind of join, and then you kind of create small communities. But you got to understand, it's all for like a common goal for equality, and trying to confront racism and talk about racism. It's not a competition. It's not who says what. They're literally working together to try to achieve this common goal. So yeah, just kind of working together within your small communities. You obviously, there's communities everywhere, but like wherever you are, whatever you do, confront that. And then yeah. So for me, it was like through running. I do a lot of public speaking now, so I could introduce it there, in all these different areas. You can kind of start addressing it, and then you make places a little bit better and better and better and better just by is by, confronting racism and being brave enough to fight for it. And
Oh,
educating on truth, because like, okay, you represent Australia, you're Australian. So we're going to treat you a little bit differently. But if you weren't, would you still be treating me the same? I'm still
okay.
South Sudanese. But you're an Olympian, you've done something for our country. You shouldn't have this pressure just because of your skin color. And sometimes there is pressure, like, it's like, I've always felt the pressure that we have to do more, just to keep doing more, to be like up there, while other people didn't have that. You perform a lot better in anything you do if you just feel a little bit relaxed. You don't have this stress, but there's like no gap to fail. Like, you always have to push, and it creates kind of stress. Like, I want to just be relaxed,
It's almost as if when you succeed and you're doing well, they want you to be Australian. But when things aren't great, well, that's because you're South Sudanese. Is this like a dichotomy of, and they want you to maybe keep in your Australian lane? This is running analogy here. Keep in your Australia lane because that's what you're here for, and that's what your focus should be, and that's why you're an Olympian. Almost as if identifying with and acknowledging your South Sudanese heritage is problematic. Is that what you're saying? That some of the perception is?
Yeah, kind of, like, especially in 2018, my training partner Joseph Dang broke the Australian record, and it was like a 50-year standing record, and we're getting all this media and stuff like that. But at the same time, 2018 was where the South Sudanese were all over the media.
Profiled,
Yeah, and I think I can't remember what news channel we're in, and we're there to speak about this wonderful season we had, because we had both crazy European season and 2 Australians in the Diamond League. We came first and second in Stockholm, and we come to the news, and like, I'm thinking, I don't know who was interviewing us, and they were asking, I don't think they really knew anything about the Australian record. They didn't know anything about, like, we've come here to talk about what we did on the track, and they wanted to ask us about, the South Sudan is this, South Sudan is that, South Sudan is this. It's like, how did you switch the focus from what you brought us here to try to change it to something else? Like, why don't we speak about what we came here for? And then I'm like, okay, now I see, if you're not prepared, if you're not kind of good speaker, they can kind of corner you into saying different things and against your own people, kind of thing. Like, it's, so that stuff too is kind of gets really annoying.
So did this little 10-year-old kid coming from North Africa to North Queensland ever think that he'd be representing the country at an elite sports level one day?
No, absolutely not. That's the thing. That was not even a thing. These opportunities, they just kind of come and go. And I mean,
but I'm sure they require a certain amount of talent, Peter. They don't just
definitely. Well, it took me. This is my 10th year in the sport, and within 10th, I've already been to one Olympic, 2 World Championships, 2-time Australian national champion, and about to go to my second Olympics. So within 10 years, that does require a lot of natural talent, obviously. And it's not an easy sport, because there's only 3 people, that can represent the country for 800 meters, only 48 people in the world. So when you put that into perspective, definitely it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot.
What do you know now about your parents' story of migration as refugees into Australia that has shaped your understanding of them?
I've definitely learned a lot, and I had to commit to actually wanting to learn more. It's one of those things you speak to your parents about it. You have to actually ask them the questions so they can answer it and tell you about it, right? Because the thing I noticed was every time there was like a media or there's something that it's always about talk about your struggle, how hard has it been to relocate from Sudan to Egypt to Queensland, and then I'm just thinking, I was 10 years old when I came here, and I started thinking like that question is probably more appropriate to my parents. They've lived in Sudan their whole life. They lived in Sudan when Sudan was one country, now Sudan's 2 countries. So they've lived through all of that stuff. And even in Egypt, through all that racism, that Sudanese cop in Egypt, I was 10 when I left. So 6 years old. My brother's experiences are a lot more different to mine, because they had to fight for us a lot. Walking to school and stuff like that. They kind of took the role of being big brothers, and they kind of copped it a lot more. There was times where they had fights in the streets and stuff like that, and they protected me from it. So again, those questions are more appropriate to them. Like, so I kind of saw it more as like I was pretty privileged because I was protected and I was young, and then understanding my parents' struggle is like, well, okay, why did you actually move? And, so I can have a better idea to answer these questions later on. And then they tell you more about it, and, the separation of Sudan and South Sudan. And then it goes deeper than that, it goes deeper than that to tribal conflicts and all that stuff. They had to move. And then, why did you move from Egypt to Australia? Well, I kind of knew I would move from there, stuff like that. So yeah, I had to really, really have those conversations with my parents, and also had that conversation with my uncle who lives in Paris. I went to Paris one time for an event, and I went to visit him, and he lived with us in Egypt, and he told me all these great struggles that they've had and all these things, and I'm just like, whoa, like, you wouldn't notice, right? It's like living in Australia, and then you go overseas to a third world country, and you're just like, whoa, we're pretty privileged. We're like super privileged, and I say that to everyone right now. I've been all around the world, and living in Australia is, health wise, and it's one of the best places to be. Put racism aside, like, there's a lot of opportunities here. It's a great land, and everyone kind of wants to be here. And then you go to the other side of the world, and you can see like the struggle in people's eyes and stuff like that. And I was saying Australia, like, racism is kind of hidden, because people do now get fired, and people do get called out for it. So people actually, I don't know if it's worse, because there's some racist people, but they just won't say it because they're scared to lose their positions, and because people speak out on them. I don't know. Like, I think we need to have those conversations too. We need to understand why these racist people have those thoughts and stuff like that. So it comes back again to just communicating and having these conversations, like just having these conversations with my parents, having these conversations with people who might be racist, having those conversations with people that sometimes it might be a misunderstanding, they don't know where you come from, they don't understand that, and educating them. You gotta actually educate people on your past, in your history, and then again, it comes down to a personal choice too. They're gonna want to learn about those things at the same time too.
And is that the kind of angle that you pivot to when you're speaking to young, let's just say Sudanese Australians, right, who are, they know they've been in the thick of media, they've been profiled in a negative way, in some places more than others, and they've had a really rough time of the way that the Australian community has necessarily looked at them. What advice do you give them when they say to you, listen, we're not going to bother, because no matter what we do, the media, the government, everyone thinks we're hopeless, we're worthless, and we're troublemakers. So why should we bother? What do you say to them?
I usually say that we must learn to talk about our problems. Sometimes we don't like to talk about our problems, about our history, but there's always conflict and tension. You've actually got to speak about it. You got to talk about it. You can't just stay there and say nothing. You gotta stand up. You gotta speak up. You gotta be strong, because if you kind of say nothing and let this stuff get to you and eat you, then you're not functioning. It's tough. So you gotta learn to stand up and speak, and it's always hard, but it's just like you gotta exercise that thing, and you might exercise it slowly, and you kind of build confidence as you keep going. But you gotta fight for justice. You gotta fight for people, and you gotta confront these issues. You have to speak. You can't kind of stay quiet, because people just think it's okay sometimes.
And you do have to confront injustices, and you do have to deal with, as you mentioned, sometimes racist individuals who have power and have influence. They're not overtly racist, but they're very subtly, maybe in the way that they recruit, or the way that they play favourites with certain players, for example. How do you get platforms where you can speak to them and tell them about your experience and what you notice as an injustice or an inequity? Do you have those platforms? And if you do, are you able to use them?
Yeah, you have to, as a person with a position, I think you have to put yourself in those positions, because usually when you're doing speaking gigs, it's usually at like some top schools, private schools, and stuff like that. So one of the first things I did, just unintentionally, was going to Leonora and speak to different communities, and I just enjoyed it. So what I did every year, I'd go into like schools that were full of refugees or indigenous people, and just go speak for free. It's good practice to learn and to speak and communicate with these people. And then you just realize you're not even speaking anymore. You're having conversations with people.
Yeah.
And what I realized is I come out of those places learning a lot more than I'm giving. And these people are so appreciative, but at the same time, they don't know that they're impacting me just as much as I thought I was impacting them, So I'm like, wow, I'm actually getting a lot more than this. I'm going to do a lot more and more and more. So I think for athletes, they need to go and do these stuff. You know, just give up your time, you know, even for free, just go to different communities, you know, because we're usually at places that you don't see these things. You got to put yourself in these things. Well, it was 2019, we were in Belgium. We're always in Belgium for training camps. And Joseph and I said, and our coach said, let's go to South Africa. So we'll put ourselves in South Africa. Like, let's go to South Africa. Let's go train there. Like, all we need is our running shoes and we can train there. But while you go on that training camp, you're not just going to train, go home and stuff like that. Let's go actually talk to the people, meet some of the people. And we met some amazing people, heard some great stories. And it's just like, well, it's you know, we got to have this conversation, got to meet people. It comes down to like just investing in people. And that's the way it should be. If you invest in the person himself, then you're not worrying about their skin color, you're not worrying about their status, you're not worrying about anything. You're investing in an individual.
That's amazing. It's like an equal playing field. This is what you're doing. So you're putting in your hard yards to do better and to engage young people so that you can lift their morale and give them positivity. I can see that. What do you think Australian society can do better to mitigate the rising tide of racism that we are seeing? And when I say Australia, I'm talking about schools and I'm talking about, let's just say, the sports community. What can they do better?
To educate on the world as it actually exists today and how we got there. So in that regard, history is very important to actually educate people on like how we got here, how people got here, not just like, you know, just today, these people are like this, that. Like, how did we get here and why are we here? Education is key. Need to have some type of programs like that, you know. I don't know, maybe put another subject in there so people learn about Australian history, learn about Indigenous history, and then do other things too, like go on excursions and do fun things that people can learn about. Like, it should be just as important, because to get through this world, you have to understand people. You can be great at school, you can be great at math and stuff like that. But if you generally don't understand people and you discriminate against them, it's not a great place to be, you know? So I think, definitely educate ourselves. And we have to have the responsibility to kind of push conversations forward. You know, we gotta have these dialogues. So I don't know, so a class like where you go and do debates, you see two different point of views. And within a debate, you actually have to do research, because you're not just saying your opinions and stuff like that. And read more, you know. That's definitely what I've done. I've read a lot. I've read you know, Brian Stevenson is one of the guys I look up to. You know, there's great leaders, you know, that are in high places. Like Brian Stevenson is amazing. I read his book Just Mercy. Tim Butcher, you know, he's Blood River, through his journey through the Congo. And another one was it's actually pretty funny, Trevor Noah. And
Born a Crime.
Born a Crime is an amazing book to read. And then you go to South Africa and you're like, whoa, you can actually notice there's three different races. There's black people, there's white people, and there's colored people. You can see it. Like, you read about it and then you can go there and then you can see it. Like, they actually exist. Or there's, and it depends. There's always leaders in whatever you like. I like comedy. So Dave Chappelle is another one that I love his leadership, because, you know, he confronts these racist issues and he's brave enough to speak about it, but he does it in humor, so some people can take it a little bit more, because some people sometimes don't want to learn about it, because it's hard, it's intense topics, and it kind of makes you sad. Like, when I was reading Tim Butcher's book, Blood River, I was in Belgium at the time, and then you could just see you getting upset, because you see what they did to the Congo and the Congolese there that living there. They're still
and how Belgium built its wealth.
And then the same people that built their wealth on are living so poorly and treated so poorly in their country, and he started getting upset, and I'm like, hold on, like, I gotta actually take a step back, because I gotta still perform and commit, because this stuff actually impacts you. So there's a time for it. You've got to be mentally strong for these things. They're not just easy things to speak about.
It's amazing. I mean, you're right. It can be very jarring, because, I mean, even as an Australian, when you look around and look at the country that we've built, or that has been built, and you look at on the back of who, on the back of what dispossession, you know, that's a really important reality to confront, which not a lot of people are always very comfortable with confronting. But you're saying, if I'm understanding right, confronting these issues is necessary to understanding them.
Yeah, like at school, you do learn about Indigenous history a bit there and a bit there, but I think it should be, from year 8 all the way to year 12. And it should be, some Catholic schools, I went to a Catholic school and religion was compulsory. I think they should put Indigenous studies as compulsory. Something like that,
Yeah.
you actually have to pass those classes to graduate. Like if you can do that with religion, we had to pass religion and English to graduate. Why couldn't you do it in Indigenous studies or something like that? This is the country we're getting all opportunity and building ourselves with anyways. So why can't you implement that system at the same time?
Yeah, it's a value call, isn't it? What do you value to pass on to students?
Exactly. The only thing I remember reading was Jasper Jones, an amazing book. And it's a good movie too. That's the only thing I really remember reading about. But these things, as time goes, you kind of forget. But if you keep visiting them, it's just like an athlete, right? I can't go train for a week and expect to be fit for the next 5 years, or I can't train for a year expect to be fit for the next 4 years. You've got to do something every day, consistently over a long period of time to kind of sink it in. So you can't. What I'm saying is, you can't go learn about Indigenous studies for 1 year and then like the rest of the 4 years you just forget about it.
Yeah.
Because you literally do forget about it.
Keep it on the radar. Before we end, I just wondered if you could share with us, and this is kind of jolting back to what we talked about earlier, but have there been experiences in the later part of your career, bearing in mind you're still quite young, where you've actually experienced racism and how you actually dealt with that in the moment?
Yeah, racism I experienced it, through different experiences. I write a lot and I kind of looked at it. I've experienced it more through like people. You can see it, I could see it. And those times I saw it and you're like silent because you're like, oh, it's not me. Then, those times you're still growing. And then now, when you see it, no, it's not right. You can't treat me differently. There's no way I'll let that happen. And then you can experience it also through yourself, which is, I've experienced a little bit more racism, especially Melbourne, through things even going out on a night out in Melbourne is, I think I've lived in Melbourne for 6 years and I barely kind of go out, but I remember trying to go out one time and the bouncer was saying, oh, you don't have the right shoes. It's like, what do you mean we don't have the right shoes? And then another place is like, oh, you guys don't have girls. It's like, does it occur to you maybe we're trying to go out to meet girls? Why do we need girls? And then you see these other people that are coming in, a bunch of guys, different color, they just go in. It's like, no, they've been here already.
And how does it make you feel in that moment when you know that you are simply being targeted based on the color of your skin? I mean,
it makes you really angry. It just ruins your night. I remember in that instant, and then I think my friend went up to him and said, look, we don't cause. It was sad that he had to justify that. It's like, we don't cause trouble. We just trying to have a good time. And this guy runs for Australia, and then he sees it's like, oh, you guys can come in. I was like, there's no way I'm going in after that. Why? What's changed now? Did I automatically just flip on the right shoes that I represented Australia?
Yeah.
It just ruins your night, and then you just end up not. I didn't want to go out anymore. I think I went home after that.
Yeah.
So it's just what gives me hope. There's a lot of good people doing good things. That's what gives me hope. There's stuff like this that you got to speak about it. There's people that are making those tough decisions. I know America with the rights and stuff. There's big time athletes that decided to protest and not play their game. That kind of put their career on the line. But it's like, okay, my career is nothing without who I am, and I think that's what you got to do. You got to be true to yourself. You'd almost rather struggle with your people than kind of then grow with people that you don't, they're not with your value system.
They're not your tribe.
That stuff gives me hope. Seeing people that brave gives me hope. And not everyone's racist and stuff like that. That stuff gives me hope. And there's great people in Australia. There's great people everywhere, and those people give me hope. That are trying to do something. Those are the things, and the stories, they give me hope. Stuff like that. It's definitely in people. People do give a lot of hope.
Find ways you can do more at domoreproject.com.au.